last episode, we sailed for 82 hours non-stop across the North Sea on our way to Dunkirk, France. In this episode, we take on the English Channel in a passage that required a strategic plan, some critical adjustments along the way, and a little bit of stamina to make it to the end. The English Channel is the body of water that separates southern England from northern France, and it links the southern part of the North Sea to the Atlantic Ocean. With more than 500 ships entering the channel each day, it is easily the busiest shipping area in the world. If you look at it on a map, it doesn't seem that big compared with other bodies of water. But the English Channel is about 350 miles long, and at its widest point, it's 150 miles wide. It covers an area that is about 29,000 square miles. But its most narrow point, the Strait of Dover, is one of the trickiest parts to pass. It is only 20.7 miles wide, and there is tons of traffic. So our original plan was to enter the English Channel and set a course for Falmouth, which is in the southwestern corner of the United Kingdom. But then we learned that you cannot bring dogs into the UK on a private vessel. Can you believe that? So we completely eliminated UK from our plans and instead opted for a course along the French coastline. During our English Channel passage, we really felt like we were engaged in a strategic game of chess. And the English Channel was the playing board. Our opponents were the wind and the tides and the waves and the weather, and also Hurricane Helene was just coming at us from a different direction. We kind of only had one piece that we could really work with, and that was our queen, Seefalke. We really had to think about our next move way in advance. And this is kind of what the whole passage was like. It was this very strategic game of chess. We knew that if we wanted to win, and that meant getting safely to our port on the other side of the English Channel, that meant that we had to stay one step ahead at all times of our opponents. And we also had to anticipate their moves. Mike spends hours and hours working on our passage plans. For this voyage, he had several scenarios, and he strategically planned many later moves in advance. For example, we knew there was a storm front moving in a few days after our scheduled Dunkirk departure, so we set a course for the lovely port of VALÉRY-EN-CAUX, about 110 nautical miles away. We would hunker down at this French coastline port and await a good weather opening.
As we said in our previous episodes, we were very lucky to have north and easterly winds when we were crossing the North Sea. But it was just a question of time for this to be over. And the storm that Michelle was talking about was rather a depression that was supposed to pass us in the north. And we were waiting on the backside of that depression. In northerly hemispheres, winds are rotating counterclockwise around a depression. So if we have a depression passing us in the north on the backside, so that means on the west end of that depression, we can expect northerly winds and northwesterly winds. And this is what we were waiting for.
Sailing, like chess, is also a game of patience. And in this case, we picked a beautiful spot to make the waiting not so terrible. If you play chess, you know that the opening game is all about putting yourself in the right position. It's the same with sailing. In addition to waiting on just the right weather, one of our key strategies was to time our departure during high water.
The first depression that passed us in the north was obviously too far in the north to get the benefit of those north and northwesterly winds. And we got into the influence of other depressions in the area. Also, all the forecast models that we that we are using, like the European model and the American model mainly, they were contradicting each other quite a lot, so which is never a good sign. And so we called off the departure pretty much in the last moment.
So we were sitting in this beautiful French port, and we were enjoying our time there, but we were itching to get back out to sea. But Mike kept telling me to be patient because we needed to wait for the right opportunity. And in this case, we thought it was on a Saturday. And so we got everything ready. We were going to leave at 10 o'clock that night. And we did everything that we normally do to prepare for departure. And I went off to walk the puppies. And when I got back, Mike said, we're not going. Our plans changed, but it's okay because I understood that this was just part of our strategy and we needed that best window of opportunity.
Then 2 days later, the weather models would agree that there would be a significant north wind window lasting for about 35 to 40 hours, which would be almost enough to make our passage all the way to the exit of the English Channel.
And so a couple of days later, we were thinking about leaving within the next day or so. And again, I got back from walking the puppies and it was about 1:30 in the afternoon. And Mike said, okay, we need to leave at high water. And high water is at 3. And that was an hour and a half away. And as it turned out, the bridge didn't open until 3:30. So we needed to leave at 3:30. And this is one of those things that I'm starting to get used to. When we're sailing, I have to be ready at all times because we take that window of opportunity. And in this case, we were engaged in this strategic game of chess, and this was our move.
Have a significant north wind window, 30 to 40 hours, large enough to make it to the exit of the English Channel. So we decided to take that opportunity. While I was sitting there and doing the passage planning and was planning to use that that window the next day, I realized that the next high water, with the next high water, we would lose most of that window, of that north wind window. So I said, okay, then we have to take this high water, which was happening while I was sitting there and doing the passage planning, and I told Michelle, okay, hey, we need to go within the next 2 hours or we will lose our opportunity to make it to Brest. And we absolutely wanted to make it to Brest because there was Helene incoming. There was a hurricane, a tropical storm moving northeast toward the Bay of Biscay. We needed to beat that storm because we knew during that storm we didn't want to be out on the water.
We waited 5 days in St. VALÉRY-EN-CAUX before setting sail to complete our passage with an anticipated destination of Brest. That night, as expected, the wind shifted and we had to shift with it.
Sometimes sailing is really like chess. You need to get overview of the board, you need to assess your opponent, you need to consider all possible moves, you need to figure out, do you want to be an offensive player or do you want to play it safe? So this time we wanted to win. We played that game to win. We didn't want to draw. We want to win and make it to Brest. So we had to take into consideration all the different moves and all the different pieces and all our limitations, like good chess players do, which in our case were the tides and the winds and the wind shifts and traffic separation schemes and traffic. And so off we went with a high water and headed north, and the tide was pushing us west, which I was not too unhappy about. The north wind shift was just not happening yet. So we were heading northwest and we were hitting the traffic separation scheme, so we turned around trying to attack, but the tides were pushing us back. So we spent a whole night shift going exactly where we were coming from, which was a little bit frustrating at times, but in the early morning the wind shifted as promised, and we could wake good time, good miles, set a course west and further northwest to develop a very good starting position for when the wind would turn west again. And this is why also, that's the reason why we never saw land the whole trip. Even though we were inside the English Channel, which you might consider a very narrow piece of water, but we never saw land.
It was night shift, and I came up to relieve Mike, and he had taken a northern course that was kind of actually off our course, and I didn't really understand why. And then he told me we just need to tack around and then come right back down, kind of over the same course that he took. And I didn't really understand this until the wind changed. And then I understood that this was part of that chess game, that we needed to put ourselves in position to make our next move. And we anticipated what our opponent was going to do, and we were right there ready to go. In chess, the mid-game is all about strengthening your position. It's the same with sailing.
And again, sometimes sailing is like chess. Your opponent makes an unpredicted move, and you just have to react. You have to have a strategy in place to take into account whatever move your opponents made be. And this time it was the wind shift to the west. The wind shift to the west much earlier than we expected, but we had our strategy in place, and we materialized the advantage that we had built over the last couple of days. And we're still carefully watching Helene approaching. I mean, Helene was still far out in the Atlantic Ocean, but we didn't want to take any chance in meeting her in person.
We didn't see land, but we did see some other cool things, like the famous cruise ship, the MS Queen Elizabeth. As we began to cross over into the northern Atlantic Ocean, everything began to burst into full, vibrant color. The choppy waves began to lengthen and become smooth as they gently rolled under us. A school of common dolphins swam right toward us, and we decided to take a short break from our chess match and play with the dolphins.
We're too young to talk about forever, talk about the weather, to know any better. I just want to laugh until I can't breathe. Midnight moonlight dancing, never get enough sleep. Oh, the whole night through. And we could count the distant tumbling stars from the roof of our cars, letting go of our hearts. Close your eyes, pretend that it's your first kiss. Darling, can you feel it? Oh, so ignorant bliss. Oh, the whole night through. 'Cause we don't wanna grow up. We just wanna be young.
We continued to play our chess match, and it was time for the end game. We had the advantage, and we needed to materialize it.
So after we finally made it to the entry of the Channel de Four at 2100, I remember that because that was high water in Brest when the tide begins to set south. And we wanted the tide to pull us through this narrow channel. It was quite tricky because we arrived there after sunset. It was pitch black dark, but we were lucky on the other side. It was calm winds, there was hardly any wind, and we took down the sails, we could motor quietly through that channel and reach our anchorage in the Envolée de Brest near Camara-sur-Mer. There was one moment when it became tricky again, because that was when we were turning east into that Envolée de Brest, and the water it felt like the water started to boil. It was like before that it was really calm and smooth waters, but then the water kind of started to boil. That's what I thought, but it was just the tide coming out of the Envolée de Brest meeting that other tide setting south in that area, and it became really choppy. And I can imagine that during strong or even fresh winds, that area might be somewhat ugly. Even though we couldn't enter the marina because it was just too dark, the marina was full and it was not very lit, so we decided to drop the anchor just maybe a quarter mile off the marina in that bay. And we knew we made it. We won that game, and it was checkmate.
Finally, after 92 straight hours sailing 348 nautical miles through the English Channel and into the northern Atlantic Ocean, we reached our destination on France's northwestern Atlantic coast. And then it was time for another waiting game. All of the crew members found ways to make the most of that waiting time and be productive. So far, we have covered 1,062 nautical miles. In our next episode, we patiently await another strategic window to cross the Bay of Biscay into Spain. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. For more details on our adventures, please visit our website and check out our logbooks. If you want to follow us in real time through our GPS satellite tracker, join our crew on Patreon. All the links are in the description below.